The restaurant sat 60 floors above the city, and I had booked the best table in it to watch my own marriage fail to show up for my birthday. "Table for two," I told the waiter, for the third time. "She's running late. 3 years married," and that sentence had quietly become my entire personality. I turned 30 tonight. I lit the candle myself, watched it sink toward the wick, and let the second chair stay empty while the city woke up in lights below the glass. The waiter kept refilling one water glass and pretending the other guest was real. I tipped him early, so at least one person at this table would feel appreciated tonight. Around me, the room was full of couples leaning in, laughing at things that weren't funny. I'd become very good at being the quiet man at the table for two, the one nobody looks at twice. That was the part of me the world had agreed on. Gray husband, convenient furniture, a technologist who smelled faintly of solvent and never raised his voice. I had let every word of it stand. She had not always looked through me. Years ago, she looked at me like I was the one warm thing in a cold building. I spent 3 years waiting for that woman to come back, and tonight I quietly stopped waiting. On the white cloth sat a small glass flacon, hand-cut, holding a scent that existed nowhere else on earth. I had made exactly one bottle of it, for her. It was still capped. Most people in this trade would have done unspeakable things for what was inside that little bottle. My wife believed I had bought it on sale. That gap was the entire marriage, in glass. My phone lit up first, not her a number I had buried under a fake name years ago. "You finally picked up," the voice said, breathless with relief. "I need a formula. Name your price." "I mix soap at a factory," I said. "You have the wrong man. Don't insult us both. One bottle of your work and my career is set for life. I am begging you here." "Then beg someone who's selling." I ended the call before he could sweeten it. He had built a famous name on work that was never his, and now he had simply run out of other people's ideas to spend. His name was Maurice Hahn, the celebrity knows, the genius the magazines adored. He had built that genius on a notebook he took from a better man years ago. I knew, because I had read the original. The only person who remembered my birthday wanted the one thing I had hidden from the world on purpose. I looked at the empty chair and almost felt flattered. Almost. Then she finally called. "Babe, I can't make it. I'm so sorry," Hyejin said, every word pre-warmed. "A friend of mine is in the hospital. I can't just leave her there alone tonight." Behind her voice there was music, low, warm, the kind you only put on for two. "There's music," I said. "It's the television," she answered, half a second too fast. A lie always needs that half second to sit down. Then a second voice slipped in. Male, close to the phone, an easy laugh. Her palm smothered the speaker, and one whisper leaked through that was never meant for my ears. "Stop that, tickles. Go take care of your friend," I said, even and warm. "You're the best. I'll make it up to you. Love you." She ended the call before the last word had finished leaving my mouth. For 3 years, she never once called on time. Tonight she called on time to say she wasn't coming. The woman had a sense of occasion after all. She just saved it for the wrong nights. Her best friend was a man named Ju Wan. She had told me 100 times he was practically a brother to her, and 100 times I had nodded along like a good piece of furniture. Brothers don't laugh with their mouths that close to a phone. I filed the thought instead of throwing it. Thrown thoughts break things early. Filed ones break things exactly on schedule. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't put a fist through the very expensive window with the very nice view. I simply understood quietly, completely, that the marriage was already over. The food arrived. I watched it go cold and congeal under the warm light, a small still life of the evening. Then I folded my napkin like the night was a meeting that had simply ended. So I made a decision while the candle still had warmth in it. The husband she could ignore was retiring, tonight, permanently, and no one would hear me lift my voice while I signed the papers. I capped the night, slid the unopened flacon into my coat, and decided it could collect dust on a shelf at home where forgotten gifts belong. Then I pulled up the one number I had never dared to use. She had handed it to me a year ago, the night she tried to buy me, and discovered I was the single thing in her empire that wasn't for sale. I dialed. It answered on the second ring. "This number is supposed to be dead. No hello." People at her altitude don't waste oxygen on hellos. "Then think of it as the dead number calling back," I said. "I have a proposal that won't keep." A pause that cost more than the dinner I never ate. "My office, 9 sharp," she said. "Waste my time and you will regret ever finding this line." She hung up first. Of course she did. I pocketed the phone and looked at the cold plate one last time. For the first time in 3 years, I had an appointment I actually intended to keep. Serion Group owned the top of the city, the way weather owns the sky, quietly, completely, and without asking anyone for permission first. At 9 the next morning, I rode an elevator past the floors where ordinary people get off, up to the one floor that didn't bother printing a label on its button. Yuna, her assistant, studied me over the rim of her glasses. "You're the soap man," she said. "I keep a list of everyone the boss will see today. You are not on my list." "Then add me at the bottom." "You are already inside her private calendar," she answered, not blinking once. "That is so much worse than my list. Go in before I start praying for you." Through the glass, I could see her already at the desk, perfectly still, a storm that someone had taught to wear a suit. "Does she bite?" I asked. "Only people who waste her time," Yuna said. "So, statistically, everyone." Kang Surian did not look up when I entered. Cold, flawless, the most feared woman in the trade, and she let the silence throw the first punch for her. 10 minutes, she said. 9 now. I set a small unlabeled vial on the glass between us. "What is that?" she said, and it landed as a verdict, not a question. "Smell it. I don't sniff strangers' chemistry sets." "Then, keep your 9 minutes. She held my eyes a moment, irritated that I hadn't flinched. Then she lifted the vial and breathed in once, carefully, the way a careful person tastes something that might be poison. Whatever crossed her face was the exact thing the whole industry had spent 10 years trying to buy, and never could. She set the vial down with both hands, like it now weighed more than the building did. "Where did this come from?" "I made it. Impossible. The man who makes things like this doesn't exist. We call him a rumor. The rumor mixes soap at a factory now," I said. "Somebody should pay him better." She was quiet for a moment, and in the quiet, I watched her recalculate every assumption she'd ever filed under my name. It is a rare thing, watching a powerful person revise reality in real time. "Name your price." "There's no price. I let it breathe. I'll give it to you for free. In return, be my best friend." For the first time, she looked at me like a person instead of a line on a ledger. "Explain that." Slowly. "My wife has a best friend," I said. "They're very close. I'd like one too. A close, loud, impossible to ignore friend. And I want her to watch me have exactly what she has. You want to use me to gut your marriage." "Yes, most men lie about that part for at least an hour. I make scent, not lies. The lying I outsource to my wife. She's gifted. You heard a sample last night, in a way." She turned the vial in the light, watching the liquid move. "A formula like this ends careers and starts dynasties. You are spending it on a domestic grudge. I'm spending it on the one woman she can't outrank, outspend, or charm. You flatter me." "No," I said. "I measured you. You're not my revenge, Miss Kang. You're gravity. Everything she values falls toward you whether she likes it or not. I just like to stand nearby when it does." That almost earned a smile, and the almost was the part that should frighten people. "I tried to hire you once," she said. "You told a number with a terrifying count of zeros to leave the room." "Why?" "Because you were buying a tool," I said. "I had enough owners." Something flickered behind her eyes, there and gone. The woman who got used by everyone and chosen by no one had just heard her own diagnosis read back to her. For half a breath, the feared CEO wasn't in the room at all, only a woman who had spent a life being acquired and never once kept. Then the suit came back on, seam by seam, and she filed the moment with the rest. "And what changed since?" she pressed. "Last night, my wife called on time for the first time in 3 years," I said. "I decided to start keeping appointments too." She hunted my face for the lie and found a man who had simply stopped bleeding. "It's an investment," she said at last, mostly to herself, the way other people whisper a prayer before they sign. She rose and offered a hand that did not shake. "From today, I am your best friend. God help her." Her grip was cool and exact, a handshake with a contract folded inside it. 3 rules. I don't repeat myself, I don't explain twice, and I do not lose. Keep up. I had exactly 1 rule, and I broke it last night. I'll manage. "Yuna will build you a calendar," she added, already turning to the window. "We'll be seen together, often, publicly, somewhere your wife cannot pretend not to look. She files reports 3 floors under you," I said. "She'll look." Yuna appeared in the doorway with a tablet. "Should I cancel your lunch with the shareholders?" "Move it," Sirion said. "I am having lunch with my best friend." Yuna looked at me, then at her boss, then noted it without a flicker of expression. Finally, she murmured on her way out. She got herself a hobby. Heejin came home a little before noon, wearing a night that had nothing to do with any hospital. "I am completely wrecked," she announced, dropping her bag. I sat up with her until 4. "You would not believe my night." "I might," I said. She kissed my cheek on her way past, and there it was under her perfume, on her shoulder, another man's cologne. Sharp, expensive, not mine. not hers. I could find that note in a dark room a year from now. I said nothing about it. A man who shows his cards on the first hand has earned the right to lose them. So I watched her drift through our living room, glowing with a good mood she thought I was too gray to read. Once, she used to come home and tell me everything: the bad meeting, the rude client, the dress she wanted in a window. Now she handed me edited highlights and called it a marriage. I had learned the difference too late to feel clever about it. I'm going out tonight, I said. A friend needs me. A launch? A big one. They can't pull it off without me. She actually stopped walking. In 3 years, I had never once owned the word plans. A friend? You don't have friends? I do now. Every word of it was true, and that was the beauty of the thing. I had simply handed her back her own sentence, ironed and pressed. In my mouth, it didn't even sound like a lie, because it wasn't one. Which friend? She asked, suspicion arriving late, the way it always did with her. You'll meet her eventually, I said. Everyone does. Then I lifted an overnight bag I had already packed and set it by the door, where she could watch it breathe. That evening, I stood in a jeweler's the size of my first apartment while Sarayan held 2 necklaces up to the light. This one says I'm bored, she said. This one says I own the room. Opinions, friend? Wear the one that frightens people. Darling, that's both of them. She watched the stones scatter light across the wall, then glanced at me sideways. You're enjoying this. I'm a professional, I said. I enjoy precise work. Tell me about her, Sarayan said, moving on to earrings. Your wife, mid-level marketer, sharp enough to climb, hungry enough to cut the corners on the way up. And she traded a man who makes miracles in a vial for a boutique heir. She traded the version of me she could actually see, I said. I hid the rest from her for 3 years. That part is honestly on me. Honesty, from the man running a revenge play, she said. Refreshing. Right on cue, my phone rang. Hyejin, then again, then a third time. Fast, the rhythm panic dials in. Your wife is persistent, Sarayan observed. She just learned I have a friend. I set the phone on the velvet and answered on speaker. Yes? Who is she? Hyejin's voice came out thin and stretched. Don't lie to me. I can hear a woman. I can hear Sarayan lean toward the phone, unhurried, a queen condescending to address the weather. He's choosing me a necklace, she said. Don't call this number again. The silence that followed had a face attached to it. Hyejin knew that voice. The whole building knew that voice. It signed the paychecks. Ms. Kang, she whispered, the name cracking straight down the middle. The line went dead from her end. Across the city, she sat alone with the phone in her lap. Then she turned its screen down on the table, slowly, with enormous care, as if a piece of glass laid face first could unring the bell she had just heard. Without thinking, she scrolled to a photo of Juwon from that morning, then locked the screen fast, as if the picture had caught fire in her hand. An hour ago, he was a comfort. Now he was evidence. And she did not yet know of what. That was efficient, Sarayan said, handing the colder of the 2 necklaces to a clerk. She thinks I'm the enemy now. You're the boss who can end her career, and the woman who has her husband, I said. Enemy is the smaller problem. I came home near midnight. The overnight bag still stood by the door where I had set it, patient as a verdict. She was sitting up in the dark, and she stared at the bag like it might lunge for her throat. You packed a bag, she said. Friends keep me out late, I told her, and went to the spare room without slamming a single door. Some exits don't need noise. The quiet ones are the kind people never quite stop hearing. On the shelf by the door, the little flacon sat where I'd left it, still capped, catching the hallway light. She looked at it for a long moment and didn't ask. She already knew it had been meant for her once. Far across town, in an office lit only by the skyline, Yuna set a thin folder in front of Sarayan. The board is digging into you again, she said, quietly. Your cousin's people, asking finance questions that were never theirs to ask. Sarayan looked at the nameless vial now sitting on her desk and smiled at nothing in particular. Good, she said. Let them dig a nice deep hole while I make a new friend. 3 floors below her, for the first time in years, a marketing report went unfiled. I wasn't in the building when it started. I didn't need to be. Some things you build once and then let gravity finish, and a rumor with a true center always finishes itself. By Monday, the marketing floor of Sarayan Group already had its story, and the story had Hyejin's name stitched through the middle of it. The report she'd abandoned on Friday still sat on her desk, blinking a deadline she had already missed. People didn't stare. That was the worst part for her. They did the polished corporate thing. Instead, they looked slightly past her, the way a whole office agrees not to mention a stain. In the break room, a junior analyst stopped mid-sentence when she walked in. Two others found sudden, urgent business at the bottom of their cups. The silence wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. She had built a career reading rooms, and this room had reached a verdict without her. "It's nothing for the record," she said, to no one who had asked her anything. "Ju-won and I are friends. People here love inventing stories." The room nodded, agreed out loud, and believed the opposite, a degree harder. A girl 2 desks over had spent a year copying Heejin's blazers and her phrases. This morning, that girl moved her chair an inch farther away, and an inch, in an office, is a continent. By noon, a screenshot from the floor chat reached her own name, a laughing emoji, a single word underneath it. Predictable. She had sent people home for less once. Now she was the thread everyone muted and nobody left. She had practiced the denial. In the 3rd floor bathroom, a paper napkin sat folded and refolded. 3 crossed-out versions of one sentence pressed into the fibers. She had rehearsed innocence the way the rest of us rehearse a pitch. I heard about that napkin later, and I'll admit it was the part that nearly made me feel something. Far too many words spent on a simple no. The whispers came in a careful order. First, the half question, isn't she the one whose husband left hanging like bait? Nobody finished it. They didn't have to. Heijin finished it for them. Nothing happened with anyone, she announced to a hallway, loudly. And Ju-won is just a friend. She had taken a rumor that was still missing half its sentence, and kindly supplied the name. By lunch, the half question had a full story, and a cast. A part of her kept waiting for me to call and fix it, to smooth the room the way I'd smoothed every room for 3 years. I didn't call. The smoother had quit, and no one had thought to warn the people who relied on him. Her phone buzzed where she'd left it face down since Friday. She turned it over, saw the name Ju-won, and felt the floor of her stomach tilt before her thumb even reached the screen. "Babe, relax. You sound wound up," Ju-won said, loud enough that the next desk could enjoy the show too. "I keep telling you, I know people. Useful people. Licensing, distribution, the boring kings who decide who gets to eat. Don't call me that here," she hissed. "There's talk, so let them talk. When I'm finished, half your floor will be working for my family's chain. Maybe even that frightening little boss of yours." He laughed, thrilled by power he had borrowed and never once earned. He was building a name out loud, the way that kind of man always does, bragging about every connection that would, much later, become the exact paper trail to bury him. He simply couldn't hear the future yet. Most people can't. "You're sure he doesn't suspect?" Ju-won asked, dropping his voice for the only intelligent sentence he'd managed all week. "He's furniture," she said. "He wouldn't notice if the apartment caught fire." 3 floors above her, the furniture was reading their hotel receipt. By afternoon, a senior manager stopped at her desk with a smile made of glass. "We're moving the launch account to Seo-jin," he said, "just while things are noisy. You understand?" She understood completely. She had just been quietly demoted by a rumor. "Nothing's been proven," she said. "Of course not," he agreed, already walking away, which is how that sentence is always answered when the answer is no. Seo-jin, the girl inheriting her account, drifted over wearing a sympathy face borrowed from a funeral. "If you need anything," she offered, already cradling the account folder like a trophy. "I won't," Haijin said. They both knew which one of them was lying. She sat back down in front of the report she would never finish, the deadline still blinking, and felt the shape of the weak press on her chest. Then, a message slid in from a number with no name attached. It was polite, it was flattering. It spoke of her underused talent and a private conversation about her future, and it did not say who was asking. She read it twice. For the first time in days, someone wanted her instead of avoiding her, and she had no idea she was reading a hook with a whole company on the other end of the line. She typed back yes before her pride could ask a single useful question. That same hour, across the city, I was looking at a different screen. Yuna had sent it without a word, which was its own kind of word. "The access you asked for," her message read. "Don't make me regret being efficient." One line, no mention of how. That was our arrangement, and I respected it. On my phone sat a hotel booking a presidential suite, reserved under a real and very familiar name, and beside it a still frame from a corridor camera holding 2 people who were plainly not visiting anyone sick. The timestamp on the frame, written small in the corner, was the night of my birthday. While I watched a candle die above the city, the sweet version of my marriage had been checking in downtown. I sat with that for a moment, not the betrayal, which I'd already buried, but the arithmetic of it. The exact hour she chose the suite was the exact hour I chose to stop being her husband. We'd made our decisions in the same night, Her downtown, me 60 floors up, each of us certain we were the one getting away with it. Ju-won's name was on the booking too, in the small print, confident as a signature. Men like him never picture the small print read aloud one day. I read everything. It's a professional habit that has already outlived 3 of my enemies. Presidential suite, generous, for 2 people who are merely friends. If it had been me, I'd have booked a standard room and put the difference toward the divorce. Nobody ever asked the gray husband about budgets, though. A year ago, I would have driven straight there and made a scene worth filming. The man I'd retired on my birthday would have begged for an explanation. The man holding the phone now simply saved the file and felt nothing he couldn't use. I didn't forward it. I didn't print it or slide it under any door. I looked at it the way you look at a key before the lock is even installed. And then I turned the phone face down on the table. You found it fast, C. Ryan said. She'd stopped by the lobby on her way to a meeting she would obviously win. You knew where to look. I knew what she'd choose, I said. She always wanted the sweet version of everything. You could end her this afternoon. I could, but you're waiting. Patience isn't kindness, I said. It's interest. The longer I wait, the more she builds, and the more there is for me to take cleanly when she signs. Why divorce then? Why not just burn it down now? Because a scene gets forgotten by Friday, I said. A signature lasts. I want her to wreck this herself and put her own name at the bottom of it. It's an investment, she said, and this time she nearly smiled saying it, as if the phrase had stopped being a shield and become a private joke we owned together. Careful, I told her. People might start thinking we're actually friends. God forbid, she said. I have a reputation to protect. Behind her, Yuna noted something on her tablet. You're on his calendar Thursday, she informed the boss. A gallery. Be seen. Smile like it costs you nothing. There was one rule in this whole game, and I never broke it. I didn't lie. I just arranged the truth in the places my wife was most likely to trip over it and let her momentum do the rest. You're patient like it's a weapon, Sarayan said. It's the only one I brought, I told her. Everything else she handed me for free. She held my eyes a moment longer than the conversation needed, then set it aside with everything else she wasn't ready to want. I closed the screen. Not now. The receipt could wait in the dark with everything else I was saving for the day. 2 lawyers shared a table. The cost of patience was simple. I had to keep living beside her and keep my face exactly this calm. Hae-jin spent the rest of that week trying to outrun a whisper, which is a great deal like outrunning your own shadow at noon. The faster she moved, the larger it grew around her feet. By Thursday, she had stopped explaining and started watching, which was worse for her, because watching meant her mind had finally caught up to the question her pride had spent 3 days refusing to ask. At home, she tried to get a reaction out of me. A slammed cupboard, a pointed sigh, a we should talk. I passed her the salt and asked about her day in a voice so even it frightened her more than shouting would have. You're different, she said one evening, studying me like a document with a clause she'd missed. I'm exactly the same, I said. You're just finally in the room. She didn't sleep well after that. I slept fine. She called me twice on Friday morning. I let it ring out both times. The woman who'd once sent every call of mine to voicemail was learning, by ear, what the far side of that silence sounded like. It wasn't cruelty. I simply, at long last, had nothing left to say to her. On Friday, she invented an errand that carried her up into the executive corridor past glass she had no business near hunting for the face that belonged to the voice that had quietly claimed her husband's evenings. The corporate screen at the end of the hall ran its loop of leadership, polished and silent, and then it settled on the chairman herself, Kang Se-ryeon. Framed and lit like the weather, the whole building lived beneath. Hae-jin had heard that voice 3 days earlier on a phone telling her never to call again. Now she had the face to bolt onto the sound, and the 2 halves came together with a click she felt in her back teeth. The woman her husband called a friend was not a girlfriend she could outdress or outcry in some parking lot. It was the most powerful person in the building, the very name Ju-won had bragged about bending. Her gray, replaceable husband had walked straight to the top of the sky and been welcomed. She doesn't usually learn employee names, Yuna said, materializing beside her with the cruelty of perfect timing. Thousands of staff. Miss Kang can't be expected to keep track. A pause, precise as a scalpel. Yours, though, I think she'll keep. Where Hae-jin started, and the lie ran out of road. Friends, Yuna finished for her, deadpan. Yes. Everyone says so, you especially. Then she walked off, leaving the sentence to do its work. Hae-jin stood very still, the way people stand when the floor is fine, but the world is not. Down the corridor, the chairman's door opened and shut, without her inside it, the way it always had. the way it always would. Hyejin's badge was still in her hand from the door she'd tapped through. Her thumb rested over the Serion logo, the same logo now woven through the rest of her life, the company where her husband had become a guest and she had become a cautionary tale. She looked at the little plastic rectangle that swore she belonged here and understood, all at once, that belonging and mattering are not the same currency. One of them she held. The other had just walked past her in a corridor without slowing its step. Just then she remembered the flacon on the shelf at home, the birthday gift she'd never bothered to open, the one she'd assumed he bought on sale. She had no idea what was inside it. She was starting to suspect she'd never known what was inside any of it. For 3 years, she had been the one with the badge, the salary, the floor under her feet. She had called him gray to his face and grayer behind his back. Now, the gray man had colors she had never been cleared to see, and she was the one being looked past in a hallway. The ground didn't split open. It simply, quietly stopped being solid. She stood in the executive hallway, holding a badge that suddenly weighed like a visitor's pass, while 3 floors down, her unfiled report kept blinking the deadline she would never, now, be allowed to make. She came at me with the one weapon she still trusted, money. It had always worked on me before, mostly because I let it. This apartment is in my parents' name, Hyejin said, arms folded, voice steadying as she found her footing. The savings are mine. You walk out of here, you walk out with what you came in with. Nothing. All right, I said. She blinked. Agreement was not the fight she had prepared for, and a person braced for a war finds peace deeply suspicious. Don't all right me. I carried this household. I carried you. She was rebuilding her certainty out loud, brick by brick, as she always did when the ground felt soft. You're agreeing because you've got nothing, and you know it. She pressed on. I've planned for this. I have a friend at a firm. I'll take the savings and the car, and I'll make sure everyone hears exactly what kind of man abandons his wife. Tell them whichever version you like, I said. I kept receipts for mine. Receipts, she scoffed. For what? The groceries. For a marriage, I said. Turns out I was the only one keeping the books. You'd be surprised what ends up in them. I set a folder on the kitchen table between us. Not a fist, not a shout. An invoice. What is that? She said, the same way her boss had once said it to me, the family resemblance of contempt. Inside was a single itemized page. Her brother's gambling debts, cleared twice. The loans in her father's name, quietly serviced. Her mother's surgery, the good surgeon, the private room. 3 years of it, summed to one cold line at the bottom. She read the total. The number sat there, patient, the way true numbers do. You kept a list, she said, and it came out as an accusation, as if bookkeeping were the betrayal in this room. I kept everything, I said. Receipts, habits, the exact half second you need before a lie. I'm thorough. You used to like that about me, before you forgot I could aim it. This is sick, she said, scanning the page. You tracked my mother's surgery like a debt. I paid for your mother's surgery like a debt, I said. The tracking came free. We're family. We were a household, I said. You ran it like a tenant who never once read the lease. You have no proof of anything, she said, switching tracks, because the money track had just collapsed under her. Proof of what, exactly? I asked. You haven't said what you did yet. So I set down the second page. A booking. A presidential suite. 2 names. A date she would recognize if she lived to be 100. She stopped breathing in that polite, careful way people do when they've decided to pretend a thing isn't on the table. Her eyes filled. I watched them do it with a professional's detachment, the way I'd appraise a sample on a strip. Good concentration, poor tenacity, pretty on the open, gone in a minute. It didn't hold the note. The apartment is yours, I said. You owe me $180,000. Divorce tomorrow. 3 sentences. I'd spent 3 years not saying them, and they took less time than the coffee took to cool. You're throwing away 3 years, she tried, softer now, reaching for the voice that used to work on me. We can fix this. We always fix this. You fix things by apologizing to a man you respect, I said. You don't have one of those in this room. You have an invoice. She crumpled the bill in her fist slowly, as though strangling the paper might strangle the number on it. The coffee she'd poured for herself sat untouched, going the gray of a thing nobody wanted anymore. You can't just decide this, she said. I already did. I'll take half. Half of everything. Half of what you think I have, I said. I'll have my lawyer send the real figure. You'll want to be sitting down when it arrives. Your lawyer. She laughed, thin and high. You don't have a lawyer. You have a factory ID and a tragic little haircut. I have both, I agreed. And a lawyer. Funny how that works, having things people assume you can't afford. The envelope was already on the counter, where I'd left it that morning. Heavy stock, a firm whose name made people sit straighter. She looked at it and didn't touch it. Fingers shy of a stove they'd been burned on before. She tried tears again, then a colder face, then the threat, cycling through them like a sample tray, hunting for the one note that still opened me. They were all empty bottles. I had thrown out the originals on my birthday. "This is because of her," she said. "Your scary little boss, your friend." "This is because of the booking," I said. "She just recommended the firm. Keep my best friend out of your mouth. You've put enough strangers in it already." That landed. She flushed, the anger arriving to evict the fear, which is the order her emotions always marched in. "My family will bury you," she said. "Bury you. You'll regret every word of this." "Call them," I said, and meant it kindly almost. "Get them down here." Then I rinsed her cold coffee down the sink and poured a fresh cup for myself, because I had a feeling I'd want it for the second act. While I waited, I signed my copy of the papers and left hers on the table, pen laid beside it, a door propped open for someone who hadn't yet decided to walk through. She watched that pen like it might bite. In a way, it already had. They arrived within the hour, which told me everything about how fast bad news travels in a family that lives on borrowed comfort. Her brother first, all chest and cologne, then her mother, dressed for war and grief in equal measure. "You," the brother said, jabbing a finger he'd never worked a day with. "You think you can threaten my sister? You're a nobody, a factory rat. We took you in. You took me in," I repeated. "That's a generous way to file it. We gave you a name, status, a family," the brother said, counting gifts he'd never bought. "You gave me a sofa and a stack of your bills to wake up to," I said. "I replaced the sofa years ago. You never noticed who paid for the new one." Her mother sailed past him and began, as mothers in this family do, with a list. My failings, alphabetized. Too quiet. Too poor, too strange about my work, never ambitious, never a real provider, never good enough for her remarkable daughter. My mother-in-law came to defend her child and read out the full inventory of my sins. She just forgot to include the receipts. I'd paid every one of them, and she'd cashed everyone without ever once asking where a factory rat finds that kind of money. "My daughter deserves better than a chemist who plays poor," her mother said, gathering steam. "A man with real money would have what?" I asked. "Paid for your husband's car, the deposit on the lake house. Check the dates against my account before you finish that sentence." She did not finish it, so I asked the question for her. "Before you finish," I said, "one thing. Who do you think paid for it? The surgery, the debts, this apartment's renovation your husband bragged about at the temple." Silence has a texture. This one was velvet. I laid one document on the table, just one. Not a lecture, not a spreadsheet, a statement, a name on it that none of them knew was mine. The kind of name that ends up on bottles in glass cases they could never afford to smell. The brother picked it up. I watched the blood leave his face, which is a rare and educational thing to witness. This is the house that makes yes," I said. "That one. And a few others, under names you'd recognize. They had spent 3 years calling me Gray. The industry, when it didn't know my face, called the man behind a dozen famous scents something else entirely. The ghost knows. A rumor. A signature with no hand attached. The hand had been doing their dishes. I'll be honest about the kind of secret it was. Not a lie and omission with very good manners. They'd had a genius at the dinner table for 3 years and spent him on errands, because a genius who carries the groceries stops looking like one. That part I will own. I let them believe it. "Where did you get this?" her mother whispered, the war dress suddenly too big for her. "I made it," I said. "The same place I make everything, including the perfume your daughter wore to meet another man. She has good taste in scent. I'd know. I'm the one who built it." Down the hall, through the cracked bedroom door, I could see Hyejin at the mirror. She was scrubbing at her own shoulder with a wet cloth, working at a cologne that wasn't there anymore, scrubbing skin that had already forgotten it, while in the next room, her whole defense came down without a single shout. She had spent that morning trying to wash off the last man. She would spend the next year trying to wash off this one conversation, and that kind of stain does not lift. I almost told her so. I let her keep scrubbing instead. The brother set the statement back on the table very gently, the way you return something to a museum. The bluster was gone. What replaced it was the look men like him get when they realize the wallet they've been spending from was attached to a person who could close it. "You can keep the apartment," I told her mother, not unkindly. "I'm not in the business of putting old people on the street, but the comfort came from me. When I leave, it leaves. You'll want to plan around that." She sat down without being asked. The brother had one last try in him, because his type always does. You owe this family. The ledger is open right here, I said. Shall I read your column out loud in front of your mother? He decided very quickly that he would rather I didn't. That's the whole trick to people who live on someone else's effort. They never picture the day the effort walks out the door. They budget for the money, they never budget for the man. Hyejin came to the bedroom doorway, the wet cloth still in her hand, and for the first time she looked at me the way I'd waited 3 years for her to look. It arrived exactly 1 season too late to be worth anything to either of us. For a moment the apartment was very quiet, the way a room goes after a glass breaks and everyone is deciding whether to mention it. Her eyes went to the unopened flacon still on the shelf by the door, the birthday gift she'd written off as something from a discount bin, and she finally understood it had been worth more than the sweet. Why didn't you ever tell me, she said very quietly, who you were? Because the man you married wasn't supposed to be impressive, I said. He was supposed to be loved. I picked the wrong thing to hide. Then my phone rang. The factory. I almost didn't answer, since I'd nearly stopped being theirs, but some instinct said this call had teeth. An instinct is just experience that hasn't filed its paperwork yet. They've blocked the license, the floor manager said, voice low and ashamed. Pulled it this morning. Word came down through distribution. They're saying you leave with a mark on you. No house in the city will take your work, not under your name. Someone wants you finished, not just gone. Any idea who? The manager asked. I have a guess, I said. He brags. It narrows the field. The guess had a boutique chain, a loud mouth, and a fistful of borrowed connections he'd been waving around an office all week. He had just spent them. That was the mistake. Borrowed power always leaves the lender's name stamped on it. Right on cue, a second call came in, a number I knew. Ju-won, always brave from a distance. Heard you got yourself blacklisted, he said, the grin audible. No hard feelings. Sign the divorce, stay out of our way, and maybe my family lets you work again, somewhere small. That's generous, I said. Put it in writing. What? The offer. Put it in writing. I collect things like that. He laughed and hung up, certain he'd won. He'd just handed me a sentence with his name on it, and I never throw those away. I thanked him and hung up. Across the room, 3 people who had come to bury me sat very still in the wreckage of the burying. And somewhere out there, a boutique heir with borrowed connections had just made his opening move. Certain it was a checkmate. He'd learn. They always learned. I set down my coffee, finally cold too, and felt the next part of the game click into place. They thought they'd cut me off from the work. They had no idea the work didn't need a name to exist. Neither anymore did I. For the first time in years, I was actually losing, and I let myself feel it for exactly 1 morning. A man who never tastes the fall forgets why the landing matters. The factory director couldn't look at me. He studied his desk, his pen, the window, every object in the room except the one he was about to fire. It's not personal, Do-yun, he said. It never is, I answered. That's what makes it cheap. He flinched at that. You were the best bench I ever ran, he said. Off the record. Everything good about me is off the record, I said. That has been the entire problem. The license is under review, indefinitely. There's pressure. From where? He didn't say. His silence had an address, though, and I could read the postmark. They said if I kept you, the channel dries up, he went on, the words spilling now they'd started. Supply, new accounts, all of it. They'd starve the whole floor to cut 1 man. So you cut the 1 man, I said. I'd have done the same. Don't lose sleep over it. I cleared my bench myself. 3 years of small bottles, careful labels, a life's work disguised as a clock-in job. They revoked my lab badge before I'd finished packing. I lifted out a strip of test papers, a row of little bottles, a worn notebook nobody had ever bothered to open. To them, it was a chemist's clutter. To me, it was every secret I had ever kept, sitting in a cardboard box, perfectly portable. I closed the lid, set the notebook on top, and walked out past the bench that had been mine for 3 years. The factory believed it had fired a technician. It had simply mailed a weapon home to the man who built it. They fired me politely. They even brought a box for my things. Say what you want about this industry. The packaging is always decent. Someone made calls, the director admitted at the door, guilt finally outweighing fear. Big calls. A family with boutiques, and someone bigger behind them, I think. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, I said. Be accurate. It's rarer. On my way out, a recruiter who'd courted me a month earlier saw me in the hall and suddenly remembered an elevator he urgently needed. The mark was working. Word travels at the speed of fear in this business, and that week, fear was wearing my name. I'd spent 3 years being underestimated on purpose. It is a strange skill, losing on purpose, holding still while people write you off. but every name that wrote me off that week was a name that would have to read its own correction later, out loud in public. A man like Juwon leaves fingerprints. A man like Juwon also borrows the hand that does the heavy lifting, and that hand belonged to someone who hadn't shown his face yet. A junior tech I'd trained for 2 years suddenly had to reorganize a shelf when I passed. The boycott had a smell to it. I should know smells. They all thought the same thing, the director included. Cut the name off a man, and you cut the man. They'd never met a man whose work had never needed his name to begin with. The ace was already mine. C. Ryan had bought it weeks ago, in a handshake over an unlabeled vial. I just hadn't laid it on the table yet, because a card you haven't shown is worth more than one you have. So I carried my box to the car and waited it out. Then my phone buzzed. Juwon, an invitation. Dressed up as a truce. Dinner, a talk. A nice restaurant. His choice. He wanted an audience. They always want an audience. I texted back one word yes, and went home to put on a decent shirt for my own execution. The restaurant was the kind that charges you for the view of people who can afford the view. Juwon had filled a private room with faces from the industry, the gossips and the gatekeepers, all there to watch. He'd even arranged the lighting. A man who lights a room to watch you fall never once considers that the same lights work perfectly well when he's the one on the floor. I counted the guests on the way to my chair. 2 editors, a distributor, the woman who decides which scents get shelf space at the big chain. Juwon hadn't gathered friends. He'd gathered witnesses. He just had the right guest list for the wrong event. There he is, Juwon announced, loud, glass already in hand. The famous gray husband, or should I say the famously unemployed one. A few people laughed, the careful laugh of those keeping their options open. Sit, he said. I ordered for you. Felt right, since you can't afford the place. Generous, I said, and sat. You're paying. Always good to know who's paying. He warmed up. You walk into my city, threaten my girl, insult my family, and for what? You're nothing without a lab to hide in. No license, no name, no money. You're well informed, I said. Someone must brief you. Briefed? I don't need a brief to spot a broke man in a borrowed shirt, he said, playing to the back of the room. This is my shirt, I said. You're thinking of your confidence that one's on loan. A few people laughed before they remembered they weren't supposed to. He'd rented a whole hall to humiliate me. The least I could do was let him finish, since he'd kindly saved me the cost of renting one to humiliate him, so I let it run. Patience isn't dignity, it's timing. The longer he performed, the larger the room he was about to be small in. You know what your problem always was? He said, leaning in, the wine loosening the leash. You think being quiet makes you deep, it just makes you easy to replace. Then replacing me should have been simple, I said. How is that going for everyone? His smile slipped a single millimeter. I collect millimeters. Order him the cheapest thing on the menu, Juwon told the waiter, loud. He can owe me. He's good at owing. I always pay my debts, I said. Ask your family. Oh, that's right. You can't reach them this evening. He didn't yet know why that was funny. He would. Across the city, Hyejin sat alone with her phone, Juwon's name open on the screen, her thumb hovering over the call button. She didn't press it. Some part of her had started to suspect which way the wind had turned, and it wasn't toward her. Nothing to say? Juwon crowed. The genius has no comeback? I'm waiting, I said. For what? For my friend. She runs late, but she's worth it. The doors opened. You can always tell when real power enters a room because the room tells on itself, the laughter dies, the spines straighten, the glasses go quiet. Kang Si-ryan walked in, 2 security men a step behind her, dressed like a verdict. She didn't scan the room for me. She already knew where I was. She always did. She crossed the floor, every eye following, and stopped at my chair. Then she did the one thing none of them expected. She took my hand. Her hand was cool and certain, and she didn't perform the warmth. She simply let the room watch her choose, in public, the man it had gathered to throw away. After a life of being chosen by no one, she knew to the cent what a public choice was worth. Sorry I'm late, she said to me, warm, and then to the room, cold. I see you've all met the man who made the scent of the year. The one your magazines have been chasing for a decade. The silence changed temperature. These were people who'd spent 10 years hunting the ghost nose without a face. The face was holding the chairman's hand at a table they'd come to laugh at. Juwon's mouth opened and produced nothing useful. Miss Kang, this is a private it was, she said. Then you made it interesting. She looked at him like a stain she'd finally decided to remove. One more thing, she said, settling into the chair beside me as if she owned it, which I was beginning to suspect she now did. I bought the factory last night. You're bankrupt, she finished, and let the sentence sit in the middle of the table where everyone could see it. Ju-won laughed, the reflex of a man who hasn't caught up to his own funeral. That's you can't just, Do-yeon is my new vice president, she said. Over him, not to him. Every contract your family's chain holds with Sarion Group is cancelled as of this morning. Read the email. They've all read the email. At the back of the room, the shelf space woman was already typing, reassigning a season of orders away from a chain that had just stopped existing in any way that counted. Business does not mourn, it reroutes. Phones came out around the room, the gatekeepers checked, and their faces emptied one by one, an empire rearranging itself before lunch. Someone near the back quietly slid their chair away from Ju-won, the same continental inch his girlfriend had once cost. This is a misunderstanding, Ju-won said, sweat finding him. You don't understand, it was never serious. The thing with Hyejin, and there it was, the brave man, finding his real shape under heat. Nothing happened between us, he said to the room, to anyone, to the cameras already filming. She threw herself at me. I felt sorry for her. It's pathetic, honestly, what she did. This is all her. The room had come to watch me get buried. Instead, they watched a man dig up his own girlfriend to use her as a shovel. You could feel the whole table turn on him. A crowd forgives a great deal, but never a coward while the camera is still rolling. Sarion didn't even watch him go. She'd already turned to the distributor. Do-yeon's first division launches next quarter, she said. You'll want in early. The shelf you save for me today is the shelf you keep tomorrow. The man nodded so fast, I worried for his neck. He sold out his girlfriend faster than the waiter brought the check. I'll give him this much, it was the most efficient thing he did all night. He stood so fast, his chair fell. He grabbed his coat and didn't grab his phone, which lay on the white cloth, face up, his chat with Hyejin glowing there for the whole table to read. He ran. People let him. Across the city, Hyejin's own phone lit with the clip before she'd finished her dinner, Ju-won's voice, crisp in restaurant audio, calling her pathetic to save his own skin. The man she'd chosen over me had just introduced her to a room full of cameras as a regret. Before you go entirely, I said, and he froze in the doorway. Ask Maurice Hahn, who really made your family's signature scent. The one that built his name. He didn't. Someday, ask him who did. Then I let him leave with that splinter in him. Maurice Hahn had built a whole career on one stolen masterpiece, and he'd spent years praying the real author stayed a rumor. I had just told a room full of industry mouths that the author had a grudge and a very good memory. Splinters like that don't stay quiet. They fester on a schedule. C. Ryan ordered wine like nothing had happened. Vice President, I said, when did you decide that? When you let him talk for 10 minutes without flinching, she said. I don't promote men who need rescuing. I promote men who arrange the rescue and wait. It's an investment then. Don't, she said. But the almost smile was there. For a woman who'd spent a life being used, being on the giving end of a rescue seemed to agree with her. We'd won the round, cleanly, in front of the people who'd come to bury me. Ju-won was finished. Hyejin had just been thrown to a room full of cameras by the man she chose over me. The math was finally working. Then Yuna's text reached us both at once. C. Ryan read it, and the temperature in her own face dropped a degree I'd never seen. The eternity formula leaked, she said quietly. Pieces of it. Tonight, to a competitor. How? I asked, though I already disliked the answer forming. It didn't walk out, she said. It was carried. Someone inside my company opened the door. Who has that kind of access? I asked. A handful of people, she said. All of them family, one way or another. Family. The word dropped between us like a coin on glass. Her board was thick with it, and one cousin in particular had been digging for months. Your cousin, I said. It wasn't a question. Tae-hyun, she said. And the name tasted like cold metal in her mouth. He smiles through every board meeting and counts this company like it's already his inheritance. I've never been able to prove a thing. Then we let him keep reaching, I said. Men who grab always grab one time too many. Ju-won was a loud man with borrowed hands. This was quiet, and it was clean, and it came from inside the house. The boutique heir had never been the real opponent. Somewhere above all of it, a patient hand had just turned its first visible card. A leak needs a villain, and the press is lazy. So they reached for the easiest face in the building, and the easiest face in any building is the one at the top. By morning, the story had decided itself. The queen who guards her formulas like children had somehow misplaced the most valuable one. Que bono? The headlines whispered and pointed straight at her. It was clean work, the kind that frames without fingerprints. Pin the theft on the owner. Watch the board lose faith, and the throne goes quietly up for grabs. Someone had studied her well. A market analyst on a muted screen mouthed the word instability over a photo of her face. The stock did what stocks do when they smell blood in the water. By the time most people finished their morning coffee, the queen was trading at a discount. I found Ryan in her office with the blinds half drawn, and for the first time since I'd known her, the armor had a dent in it. She stood very straight, which is what she did instead of leaning. Sit, I said. You don't sit when you're being hunted, she said. You stand, so they have to aim. Spoken like someone who's been hunted before. Since I was a girl, she said. My own family wrote the rules. They think I leaked my own crown jewel, she said, not turning around. My own board. They're drafting the language already. Loss of confidence. Polite for a coup. Then we find who actually did it, I said. Before the language sets. We, she turned. You're a vice president of 3 weeks. This is a war I was born into. Then you've been fighting it too long to see it clearly. Let the new man look. It was a strange thing, standing in that office. For a year she'd tried to buy me, and I'd been the one thing she couldn't own. Now I was offering myself for free, off the contract, and she didn't know what to do with a gift. People who are only ever used develop an allergy to kindness. They keep checking it for the hook. She checked me twice, found nothing barbed, and looked more unsettled than if she'd found a blade. Why, she said. Why help me with this? It isn't in our arrangement, because the people doing this to you are the same people who used you your whole life, I said. I have a personal dislike of those people. Call it professional courtesy. Professional courtesy, she repeated. You keep pretending this is business. It is business, I said. It's just not only business anymore. Don't tell my contract. She didn't smile, but she didn't argue either, which from her was nearly a confession. She studied me the way she'd studied the vial on the first day. And if I'm guilty, you're not. You can't know that. I can, I said. Guilt has a smell. So does fear. You smell like neither. You smell like someone deciding which throat to go for first. That earned the almost smile, thin and tired. Yuna, she called. Her assistant appeared. Where's the board right now? Conference room, Yuna said. Reading statements they wrote yesterday. Strangely prepared for a surprise. There it was. Everyone in this building is panicking, I said. How many people on that board look surprised? Yuna considered. One of them isn't. He brought his own pen. The man who isn't surprised by the surprise, I said. In my experience, that's rarely the innocent one. Sarayan's eyes sharpened. She knew exactly which chair I meant without my saying it. She'd suspected it for months and never let herself look directly, the way you don't look at the sun even when it's burning you. Get me the access data, I said. Every door, every log, the window the leak went out. I'll bring you a name, not a guess. A name with a date attached. And if it leads where I think it leads, then we let him keep reaching, I said, until he reaches into a trap. She gave the order with a single nod, and Yuna vanished to make it real. As I left, Sarayan said, quiet, to my back, no one's defended me since I was 14 years old. Then you're overdue, I said, and went to read the truth off a screen. The office at night is a different animal. The ambition drains out with the daylight, and you're left with the bones of the place, the hum of servers, the cleaners' carts, the honesty of an empty room. I didn't need to understand the machinery. I never do. I needed the one window of time the formula walked, and the short list of badges that could open the doors it walked through. The rest is just patience with a screen. The leak hadn't smashed a window. It had used a key. And keys in a building like this are issued, signed for, logged, approved by someone senior enough to say yes. I wasn't hunting a thief. I was hunting whoever signed the permission slip. Yuna stayed, which surprised me. She brought 2 coffees and set one down like a tax. You don't have to be here, I said. She pays me to be where the knives are, Yuna said. Tonight the knives are here. We worked in the kind of quiet that does real things. Door logs, timestamps, a back stairwell camera with a view of a card reader. Somewhere in that gray footage was a person who'd opened a door they shouldn't have. There, a badge at the secure floor in the dead window between shifts, when the honest people are asleep and the careful people think no one's counting. The reader took it. The little light went green for someone who should have been red. Someone had granted that badge a temporary override the same week. An override needs a senior approval. The approval carried a stamp. The stamp carried a name I wasn't ready to say out loud in a room with cameras in the ceiling. I poured the second coffee Yuna had taxed me with and drank it cold. Across the city, the woman whose badge kept going green in the dead window slept beside no one, dreaming, probably, of the promotion she'd sold her whole future to buy. How long have you had this narrowed? I asked. Yuna slid a single sheet across the desk, face down, the way she did everything minimal, exact, faintly threatening. I made a list of suspects, she said. It's short. I turned it over. It held 3 names. Then she reached over and crossed out 2 with 1 stroke each, leaving the third alone on the page like a confession. You already knew, I said. I suspect, Yuna corrected. You confirm. That's why she keeps you and merely tolerates me. She tolerates you? Adores, Yuna said, flat as a tabletop. I just never make her say it. Yuna economizes on everything, including drama. I respect a woman who won't waste a syllable. The remaining names sat there and waited for me to feel something about it. I looked at the access times beside it, the dead window entries, the green light that should have been red. The dates lined up with a marriage I used to be in. I didn't say it out loud. A name said too early is a warning to the guilty. I wanted this one airtight, witnessed, undeniable, the kind of truth that doesn't bend when a lawyer leans on it. So I sat with it instead. It wasn't satisfying, finding her there. I'd expected at least a flicker of it. Instead, there was only the cold arithmetic of a woman who traded everything she had for a promise from a stranger, and the quiet certainty that the stranger had a name on a board. The name on Yuna's sheet was Hee-jin. My wife had robbed the woman I was protecting. The personal and the corporate, which I'd kept in separate drawers all this time, had just been welded shut into one. Some doors tell the truth even when people won't. Hyejin's badge met one of those the next morning at the turnstile, in front of the early crowd. She pressed it to the reader the way she'd done 1,000 times. The lock stayed shut. Read. She tried again, harder, as if force could argue with a database. Read. A third time, and the little machine beeped its small public verdict. A year ago, a line forming behind Hyejin meant people waiting on her approval. This morning it meant an audience, restless and quietly delighted, watching a small machine refuse her. The same crowd. A brand new verdict. The turnstile turned out to be the most honest thing in that entire building. It didn't accuse her, didn't gossip, didn't soften it. It simply said no and lit up red while a line formed behind her. There's a mistake, she told the guard, voice climbing. I work here, 3 floors up. Check the system. The system's what's stopping you, ma'am, the guard said, not unkindly. He'd done this before. There's always a box. Call Ms. Kang, Hyejin said. She'll clear it. Ms. Kang signed the order, the guard said. The name she had thrown around all year as a weapon had just become the hand on the lock. The box was already waiting. Her desk things, packed by someone else's hands, the mug, the framed nothing, a hairbrush, the small archaeology of a job, boxed and set by the gate. She stared at it like it belonged to a stranger. I came down because I wanted to see her face when she understood. That's an ugly thing to admit, so I'll admit it. After 3 years of being looked through, I wanted one clean look across a turnstile. You, she said. The pieces arrived for her all at once. You did this. The logs did this, I said. You just signed them every night in green until someone finally read them in the morning. I was just helping, she said. The same words she'd built her whole life on. Helping who, Heejin? It wasn't they said it was nothing. Just files, just information. Who said? Her mouth opened and the fear walked out ahead of her judgment. Someone on the board, she breathed. A promotion, a real one. They said you'd never know. They said it came from the top. They said she stopped, far too late, as she always did. She just handed me the thread that ran upstairs. How far up? I asked. I never met him in person, she said. Just messages. A voice, once. He knew things about the board, about her, things only someone inside could know. She was describing a handler and didn't even own the word for it. There it was. Not Juwan, who shouts. Someone who whispers from a high chair and lets the hungry do the climbing. The mole had a handler, and the handler had a seat at the table that was trying to bury her queen. That was when Sarayan arrived. She didn't shout. She looked at Hyejin the way you look at the small print after you've already lost money to it, with a tired, exact attention. The suspicion had finally lifted off her own shoulders and landed where it belonged. In Hyejin's open box sat a sample strip from the counterfeit on the market, brought up as evidence. The fake. As Sarayan passed it, the scent reached her, and something crossed her face I had never seen there. Not anger. Recognition. Memory. A door opening on a room she'd locked years ago. She caught herself, fast, the way she caught everything. But I'm in the business of noticing what people try to hide, and she just flinched at a smell. I filed it without a word. That flinch would matter later. Everything she buried did. That scent, I said carefully. It bothers you. It's a cheap copy, she said too fast, the queen's speed snapping back into her voice. It bothers me the way all theft does. She was lying, and we both heard it, and neither of us reached for it. Some doors you open later, or never. Then she turned to me, and the queen was gone for a moment, and someone younger and far more dangerous to my plans stood in her place. Who are you, really? She said very quietly. No one finds things this fast. No one defends me at all. I'm your best friend, I said. You wrote the contract. The contract didn't ask you to stay up all night for me, she said. Her hand lifted, almost found mine, hovered there in the space between a handshake and something neither of us had budgeted for. Then she let it fall, because we were not alone, and queens choose their witnesses. For the record, I wanted to take it the hand. That was the part that worried me. I'd walked into all this running a revenge play with a contract where a heart should be, and somewhere between a vial and a sleepless night. The contract had started keeping secrets from me too. Hyojin watched the whole thing from behind a turnstile that wouldn't open. She'd thrown away a man who would stay up all night for the woman he believed in. She was learning, late, what that man was worth by watching someone else nearly take his hand. A guard set her badge in the box with the rest of it. The little plastic card that used to mean she belonged here lay on top of the mug, screen up, dead. The red lock blinked behind her like a heartbeat that had finally stopped. They promised you a future, I told her. Not cruel, just done. They spent your present to buy it. Whoever they are, you're the receipt they'll throw away. I'd know. I've been collecting receipts all year. She didn't answer. There wasn't an answer that survived contact with the box. She picked it up because there was nothing else to hold and walked out through the visitor's gate, which was the only one that would still let her pass. She paused at the door, the box heavy in her arms, and looked back once, not at me, at C. Ryan, at the almost. I think that was the moment its true size landed on her, the thing she'd thrown away, not the money. The man who would have stood between her and an entire board. Upstairs, the board did not wait for the dust to settle. Within the hour, a motion was filed, a vote of no confidence, a call for emergency leadership in this time of crisis. The man who'd brought his own pen had stopped whispering. Kang Tae-hyun had decided to take the chair while the queen was still bleeding, and he'd decided to do it in the open. He thought he'd timed it perfectly. Strike while she's weak, while the press is hostile, while her new vice president is busy with a turnstile. He'd made one error. He had just taught the quiet man at her side exactly how the leak was signed. Coups need silence, and he'd chosen this moment to make his loudest move yet in a room full of witnesses, handing me the date it all began. The board met at a long table her father had commissioned 30 years ago, back when the company was a dream and a debt. Today, his daughter would be voted off it. On it, by men who'd never built a thing. I sat against the wall, where vice presidents sit, and watched a coup put on its good suit. They don't call it a coup at this altitude. They serve it with water glasses and an agenda. The crown chair sat empty at the head, waiting. C. Ryan stood beside it instead of in it, which told everyone watching that she already knew which way the water ran. She just refused to drown sitting down. Tae-hyun rose with the heavy reluctance of a man who has rehearsed reluctance. He smoothed his tie. He looked sad in the specific way that costs nothing. None of us wanted this day, he began. But the company is bigger than any one name. Let's be adults about this, Sarayan, he said, and I made a small mark in my head. That was the first time. With men like him, the phrase is a tell, and tells like to repeat. He'd say it again before the hour was out. He always did. Adults was the word he reached for whenever he wanted a robbery to sound like a budget meeting. I started a tally in the corner of my mind and gave the first mark its own little box. He turned to a screen, the findings. A tidy story, the eternity formula compromised on her watch, her security, her signature on the program, loss of confidence, instability. The same words the muted analysts had been fed all week, now wearing suits. One board member, an old man named Pyo who had known her father, frowned at the screen. These dates, he started. The dates are verified, Tae-hyun said smoothly, and Pyo, tired, close to retirement, decided his frown wasn't worth his pension. He studied his own hands instead. This isn't a punishment, he told the room, gentle as a knife going in slow. It's a restructuring, a steady hand while we recover trust. He called a coup a restructuring. Beautiful. I'd have called it theft with a brochure. He had a gift for it. I'll grant him that. He could make larceny sound like a quarterly initiative. Half the men at that table would drive home and call it leadership, and believe it, because believing it was cheaper than objecting to it. Sarayan didn't raise her voice. She never does. You're using a leak you can't trace to remove the only person who could trace it, she said. That's not stability. That's opportunity wearing my crisis as a costume. You see, Taehyun said to the room, almost fond. Let's be adults about this. Accusations help no one. Twice now. I gave the tally its second mark. A man tells you exactly who he is, if you let him talk long enough. And Taehyun never once stopped talking. Emotional, Taehyun said to the table, as if naming the weather. Understandable, which is precisely why we need calm leadership now. The men nodded. Nodding is the easiest exercise in any boardroom. It tones nothing and excuses everything. Then he put up his proof, and he made a mistake. It was small. Mistakes at this level always are. The slide listed the leak window, the access times, the compromised batch confident, specific, damning. Too specific. One detail on that slide was a thing only the person who arranged the leak could possibly know, a timestamp that hadn't been in any report, because I'd held that report myself and never released it. He hadn't read about the leak. He'd scheduled it. It was the kind of detail that means nothing to a room and everything to one reader. A date that lived in only 2 places: my private file and the head of whoever wrote the leak. Taehyun had just confused his own calendar with the official record. Guilt always keeps bad notes. I didn't stand up. I didn't point. A crack you announce is a crack they patch. I simply photographed it behind my eyes, the way I photograph everything, and filed it with the receipts. The man was hanging a noose and stenciling his own name on the rope. Shall we vote? Taehyun said, because the kind thing, the adult thing, is to make it quick. Hands went up around the table her father built. Old men who'd shaken that father's hand raised theirs without quite meeting her eyes. Pyo's hand went up last and lowest, an apology dressed as a vote. She watched each one rise without flinching. I think she'd been counting these men her whole life, waiting to see which would do exactly this. Not one of them surprised her. That was the loneliest part of the room. It carried. Of course it carried. The math had been done in a hallway days ago. The meeting was just the part where they made it look like a decision. The chair at the head stayed empty, and now it would stay empty with paperwork. You'll always have a place here, Taehyun told her, the cruelest sentence in the corporate language, the one that means you have no place here. As a founder's daughter, as family. He spread his hands, the empty co-founder's gesture. He'd perfected the shape and lost the meaning. Outside, in a glass hallway downstairs, a woman I used to be married to sat on a bench by a turnstile that no longer knew her. Hyojin held the box of her desk things in her lap, her dead badge on top, watching people who still belonged here walk past. 2 queens deposed in one building in 1 week, and only one of them had earned it. Sarayan gathered nothing because she'd brought nothing to gather. She'd learned long ago not to keep anything in a place that could be taken. She walked the length of her father's table, past every raised hand, and didn't hurry. At the door, she stopped beside my chair. The whole room was watching to see what the vice president would do now. My contract was a corpse on the floor. My wife was ruined. My revenge complete. My exit clean and waiting. Everyone in that room assumed I would take it. Taehyun assumed it most of all. He even smiled at me, one professional to another, the smile that says we both know how this works. I gave him nothing back. Nothing is the most expensive thing you can hand a man who's counting on a reaction. Press is downstairs, Yuna murmured as we left. He's about to give a statement, savior of the company. He wants cameras. Let him, I said. Men who narrate their own rescue tend to leave the script lying around. We'll need it later. We found the after room, a small office that wasn't hers anymore, that still smelled faintly of her. Sarayan stood at the window with the city laid out beneath her like an empire she'd just been handed the receipt for, paid in full, returned for store credit. You can leave, she said without turning. The contract's fulfilled. Your wife is finished. You have what you came for. There's nothing here now but a woman with no chair. She said it flatly, bad news read aloud to spare us both the suspense. You're giving me an exit, I said. Most generous thing you've done since the necklace. I'm giving you the truth. There's a difference. Is there? You've been handing me exits since the first morning, Ms. Kang. I keep declining them. You'd think you'd have spotted the pattern by now. I know, I said, and I didn't move toward the door. She turned at that. For a woman who reads rooms for a living, she looked for 1 second like she couldn't read this one. Why are you still standing there? Because you said I could leave, I said. You didn't say I should. I have no company, no leverage. No reason left to be useful to you. Then it's a good thing, I said. that I stopped being here for the useful part a while ago. I'd just been hoping you hadn't noticed. She crossed the room slowly, half expecting me to turn out not to be real. People don't stay, she said, not with me. They stay near me for the company, the access, the name. The company is gone, and you are still standing here. Then it was never the company, I said. You already ran that math. You're just afraid of the answer it gave you. She offered me freedom like she was selling it, all terms and exits. I turned it down like I was the one buying. Somewhere in the last month, the math of us had quietly inverted, and neither of us had signed off on it. It's an investment, she said, reaching for the old armor, the phrase that had carried her through every moment she refused to feel. But the word cracked in the middle this time. The shield wouldn't hold. What came out instead, very quietly, was, "Thank you." I'd never heard her say it. I suspect a lot of people hadn't. From her, it landed heavier than any contract, because it cost her the one thing she'd spent a lifetime guarding, the admission that she needed anyone at all. She'd spent a lifetime being an investment to everyone. Her father's, her board's, her dead mother's unfinished business. No one had ever simply shown up. The phrase "thank you" had rusted shut from disuse. I let her keep the silence after it. Some sentences need room to land. "The scent you flinched at," I said gently, because the door was finally open a crack, and I'm a man who notices doors. The counterfeit. It wasn't just theft to you. You knew it. She was quiet a long moment, the city burning gold below us. "Eternity," she said at last, the name strange in her mouth. "Before it was yours, before it was a formula, it was a smell. From a long time ago. From the only stretch of my life when someone wanted me and not the company." She stopped there at the edge and didn't step off. That's all I'll say, for now. But she'd said enough. Eternity wasn't a product to her. It was a person, a season, a version of herself that existed before the company swallowed her whole. I'd rebuilt her happiest year out of memory and molecules and never known whose year it was. I didn't push. Some reveals you let a person make in their own season. I'd built the scent of her best memory by accident and handed it to her enemy's market as a fake, and I hadn't even known. The universe has a sense of humor. It's just rarely a kind one. There was a man once who taught me everything I know about scent, a quiet master with a brilliant nose, and no gift at all for protecting himself. Maurice Hahn took his greatest work, stamped his own name on it, and let the old man die forgotten and broke. I went underground the day we buried him. The ghost nose was never a brand. It was a grave I dug to hide inside. Una came in without knocking and set 2 cups of tea on the desk, said nothing, and left. The most eloquent thing anyone did all day. C. Ryan looked at the second cup like it was proof of something she'd stopped believing in. "What happens now?" she said. "Now you lose the round," I said, loudly, publicly. "You let them think they've won, because a man who thinks he's won stops hiding things. And while he celebrates, I read the rope he signed his name on. You're enjoying this." "I'm a professional," I said. "I enjoy precise work." It got the ghost of a smile out of her, which on that particular afternoon felt like a small national holiday. "Tell me what you need from me," she said. "Nothing yet," I said. "Lose well. Rest. Let them throw their party. The best traps are the ones the victim decorates himself. And you? I have a funeral to finally walk away from," I said, 10 years late for it. For one quiet hour in a borrowed office, the revenge play I'd written stopped being a play. I'd come into this to make my wife taste her own poison. I was staying for a reason that wasn't on any page I'd authored, and that scared me more than the board ever could. Then both our phones lit at once, and the hour ended the way good hours do, abruptly, and on someone else's terms. It was everywhere already. A statement. A photo, a familiar theatrical face beside Tae-hyun at a podium. Maurice Hahn, the celebrity nose, lending his fame to the new regime, wearing the smile of a man finally getting to bury a secret. He looked so comfortable up there beside the new king, certain the old grave would stay shut forever. He'd helped me hide in it for 10 years without ever knowing. Now here he was, on the record at a podium, reminding the whole industry that the body was buried, and forgetting that the only person who knew where it lay was still very much alive. Serion Group's disgraced advisor, the headline ran, "Exposed." And beneath it, my face, not the gray husband, not the vice president. An older photo, a younger man, and a story rewritten with the truth turned exactly inside out. They were calling me the thief, the imposter. The man who'd stolen another's genius and vanished to hide it. They'd cracked open my past to save themselves, and they'd done it backwards on purpose, because the surest way to bury a real story is to tell a louder fake one first. Maurice knew which story was true. That was the point. He was betting his whole career that I'd stay a ghost rather than prove it. They want you to disappear again, Sarayan said, reading my face. Whatever this is, they're counting on your silence. They are, I said, and set down the tea. For 10 years, I'd let the lie stand to protect a dead man's name. The dead man, I decided, would understand. It was time to stop being a ghost. By morning, the lie had legs. Thief, imposter, the gray nobody who stole a great man's genius and hid behind a factory job. Maurice told it beautifully on every channel, because Maurice had practiced telling it. The clever part was the shape of it. He hadn't denied the ghost nose existed. He'd simply claimed to be the victim of him. Accuse the man you robbed of robbing you, and you get to be the wounded party at your own crime scene. Half the people who'd shaken my hand last week now studied their phones when I passed. The other half had never shaken it at all. A reputation I was relearning is just a rumor with better lighting. So Ryan found me in the lab the company had let me keep. The small one nobody important visited. I was holding a drawer I hadn't opened in 10 years. The way you hold a coffin you helped lower. Tell me the real version, she said. Not the press version. Yours. So I told her the short way because the long way still cost too much. There was a man, the best nose I ever met. He taught me everything, including how to be too gentle for this industry. Morris was his assistant. Charming, ambitious, no talent of his own worth the name. One day, my teacher's masterpiece launched under Morris's signature. The contracts were airtight. The old man had trusted a handshake. Handshakes don't hold up against lawyers. He never even raised his voice about it, I said. I think that's what killed him. Not the theft, the silence after, when the whole industry agreed not to notice. See, Ryan understood that one. She'd lived a version of it in a boardroom a week ago. He didn't fight it. He didn't have the stomach. He just got quiet, and then he got sick. And then he was gone, in a rented room, forgotten by the same industry that was wearing his work as cologne. I closed the drawer. I buried him on a Tuesday. Nobody came. I stopped using my name the same week. That's the ghost nose, I said, not a legend. A man who decided the work could live as long as the name stayed dead. If they never knew it was me, they could never do to me what they did to him. It was the most I'd said about it out loud in a decade. Sarayan was quiet for a long time. Then she did something rare. She told me one of hers. I was 19, she said. There was a summer, a person who wanted me before I was a company, before I was a strategy. It ended. They always end. But there was a scent in that summer. A small perfume, nothing famous, long discontinued. I've spent 15 years and an obscene amount of money trying to find anyone who could rebuild it. Every great nose failed. They made it technically. None of them made it true. She looked at me. Then a rumor started selling a scent that smelled like being wanted. I went hunting the ghost who made it. The drawer in my hand suddenly weighed more. Eternity, I said. Eternity, she answered. You didn't recreate a memory of mine by accident, Do-yeon. You're the only person alive who could. I came looking for the maker of the one thing I lost. I just didn't expect him to be the one man I couldn't buy. So the contract, I said. The offer. A year ago. It was never about hiring a technologist. It was about finding a ghost, she said. I told myself it was an investment. I tell myself that about everything I'm afraid to want. I had built the smell of her happiest summer out of instinct, handed it to her as a business chip, and named it Eternity, without knowing I was handing a woman back the only year anyone had loved her. The universe has a sense of humor. I keep saying that. It keeps proving it. I hid for 10 years, I said, mostly to myself, and a smell is what finally dragged me out. There's an occupational hazard for you. Death by third note. She almost laughed. On her, almost laughing is an event with weather. You're not afraid, she observed. You're about to throw away 10 years of safety for a dead man's name. The dead man would do it for me, I said. He did? Actually, he just did it badly. I'm only correcting his technique. From the drawer, I took the thing that would end the lie. A formula, dated and witnessed, sealed by a patent office a decade ago, the original, with every note in my own hand, including one small deliberate flaw in the third accord I'd left there, like a fingerprint. Every maker signs his work somewhere, only he can find. My phone sat on the bench between us, silent now. For weeks it had lit up with Hyejin's name, call after unanswered call, the woman who'd once let mine ring out, learning the long way how that felt. Now even those had stopped. The silence was its own kind of verdict, and I didn't miss the noise. I'd spent 3 years answering that woman's silences. Now I owned hers, a small drawer of missed calls gone quiet, and felt nothing I could sell and nothing I needed to. That's the thing no one warns you about closure. It's mostly just quiet. They want a spectacle, Sirion said. Maurice has challenged you to a public tasting. The gala. The whole industry, the jury, the press, cameras on every wall. He thinks he's dragging you to your execution. Good, I said, sealing the formula in my coat. Let him keep thinking that. A man rarely checks the gallows for trapdoors when he built them himself. The gala filled the expo center with everyone who mattered and everyone who wanted to watch someone stop mattering. Chandeliers, press risers, a jury of master perfumers at a long table, and 2 stations on a raised stage under lights built to miss nothing. The jury held a sealed copy of the true profile, the one the original author would match without trying. Nobody in the room knew the original author was about to climb the steps in a coat Maurice kept insulting. Maurice arrived like a man accepting an award he'd already written the speech for. White suit, easy smile, the practiced grief of the falsely accused. I didn't want this, he told a reporter, loving every second, but a thief must be answered, for my teacher's memory. He even used the word teacher. The nerve was almost artistic. Do-yun, he greeted me on stage, warm for the cameras, still hiding behind that sad little coat. Show them what you've got, or admit you've got nothing but a story. I'll show them, I said. Take your time first. You've clearly prepared. It would be rude to rush a performance. A ripple went through the press at that. They'd come for a hanging, and the condemned man was politely offering his executioner more rope. Confusion is the first crack in a crowd that thinks it already knows the ending. The format was simple. Each of us would speak to eternity, its construction, its soul, its author, and the jury, who had the original profile sealed, would judge who actually knew the thing from the inside. Maurice went first. Of course he did. He'd been waiting his whole life to explain my work to me. He was good theater, I'll grant him that. He walked the notes like a tour guide in a house he'd burgled, naming the top, the heart, the dry down, painting himself as the tortured genius behind each one. The room leaned in. Stolen confidence is still confidence, and a crowd can't smell the difference. Yet, I watched the jury, not Maurice. 2 of them nodded along. One, the old master who'd known my teacher's hand, wore a small frown, the frown of a man hearing something almost right, the way a forged signature is almost right. And here, Maurice announced, lifting a strip with a flourish, the master stroke, the 3rd accord. That unexpected turn, the imitators never understand, a deliberate dissonance, my signature, a flaw that is no flaw but genius. He smiled at me. Could a factory technician even hear what I did there? He stole even my mistake. I'll say this for the man: if you're going to rob someone, at least rob the good parts. He'd memorized my one real error so thoroughly, he'd decided it was his soul. The whole room waited for the imposter to crumble. I let the wait get good and long. You're right that it's a flaw, I said. You're wrong that it's genius. It's a mistake. Mine. I left it in the 3rd accord 11 years ago because I was young and in a hurry. And then I kept it because a man should be able to find his own work in the dark. I drew the sealed formula from my coat. Would the jury read the date? They broke the seal. The patent stamp, the witness date, the original notes in my hand, 11 years old, predating Maurice's masterpiece by 3. And there, written plainly in the 3rd accord, the exact flaw he'd just claimed as his signature, labeled in my own writing as an error to fix and never fixed. It's a strange feeling, beating a man with your own mistake. He'd polished my worst decision into his crown jewel and worn it for years. The only thing he'd ever added to my work was his name, and now even that was peeling off in front of everyone. The room did the arithmetic all at once. You could hear it happen, the particular silence of 200 people recalculating a man. The jury passed the page down the table. One of them, an old master who'd known my teacher, looked up at me and said very quietly, "It's you. The ghost knows. It was always you." Maurice's sample strip slipped from his fingers and drifted to the stage. His hand, the famous hand the magazines photographed, had started to shake. "That's a forgery," he tried, voice climbing. "He backdated it. The patent office backdated it," the old juror said, 11 years ago, for a factory technician no one had heard of. The question answered itself, and Maurice heard it answer. The applause started somewhere in the back, uncertain, then found its feet and turned not toward the man in the white suit, but toward the one in the sad little coat. 10 years a ghost, and the industry chose that exact moment to learn my name and shout it. I'd spent a decade avoiding this room. It turned out to be quieter inside the noise than I expected. "You knew," Maurice said to me, stricken, as the cameras drank it. "You let me stand here and say all of it. I let you sign it," I said. I just supplied the pen and the witnesses. You did the rest. You always did the rest. That was the whole trick of you. You only ever needed someone else's work and a room full of people to lie to. He looked for an exit and found only lenses. The man who'd buried my teacher under his own name spent the next 10 minutes burying himself, denial by denial, each one worse, the way a man in a pit keeps asking for a bigger shovel. Nobody handed him one. A reporter called out the question that ends careers. Mr. Han, did you steal it? He didn't answer. In this business, the pause is the answer, and his pause went on long enough to file for tenure. For once in his gilded career, Maurice Han had to stand in a room as exactly what he was. Surian watched from the wings, and when our eyes met, she gave me the almost smile, the real one, the one that costs her something. Ousted from her chair, smeared in the press, standing in borrowed shadows, and still, somehow, the most powerful person in the building, because she was the only one not performing. You could have warned me how good that would feel, she murmured when I came off the stage. I didn't know, I said. I've never done it in the light before. Turns out the light was the point. He took my teacher in the dark. I wanted witnesses for this one. I'd paid for it though. The ghost was dead now in the other direction. 10 years of safety gone in one sealed envelope. Every enemy I had would now know exactly whose work to come for and exactly where to find the man who made it. Anonymity had been a coffin, but coffins keep the weather off. My phone buzzed before I'd left the stage. Yuna, 3 words. It started. Taehyun. Then, a breath later, the rest. He hadn't waited for the gala to end. While the room crowned the ghost nose, the new chairman had gone all in a hostile takeover of Sarion Group, financed to the last cent by the rival conglomerate. A buyout designed to swallow the company whole before sundown and put it somewhere I could never reach it. It was a beautiful move on paper, fast, brutal, fully funded. The only flaw was the funding. Borrowed money always arrives with a lender, and a lender always leaves a name on the wire. Taehyun had just signed for the rope in front of the entire market. He'd bet everything on one move, the way cornered men do when they mistake panic for strategy. The competitor's money was already wired, the offer already public. He thought he was closing the trap. He had no idea he'd just put every dollar of someone else's money into a building I now knew how to read from the inside. The duel was won. The war had just gone all in. We didn't build the trap. We just made sure the trap looked exactly like the win he wanted. A cornered man will run straight into a door if you paint freedom on it. That's the whole secret to beating a greedy man. You don't outfight him. You outweight him, and you make the bait look like the thing he's already decided he deserves. The war room was a quiet office and 4 people who didn't waste words. Sarion, Yuna, a lawyer who spoke in clauses, and me. On the table sat one folder. Everything we needed lived inside it. It's thin, the lawyer said, weighing it in one hand. Thin is fine, I said. A noose is thin, too. It only has to hold one neck. He wrote that down. Lawyers love a sentence they can build twice. Walk me through it, Sirion said. There's nothing to walk, I said. He completes the takeover with the competitor's money. The competitor's money has a name on it. That name is the whole case. That's the plan. If a plan takes longer than one line to explain, it isn't a plan. It's an excuse. She looked at the folder, then at me. A week ago, she'd lost her father's company on a vote. Now she was being asked to do nothing and trust it. For a woman who controlled everything, doing nothing was the hardest move on the board. My whole life I was told to sit still and let men handle it, she said. Now you're telling me to sit still. I'm telling you to aim, I said. Sitting still is what you do right before you fire. There's a difference, and he's about to learn it the loud way. You want me to let him win, she said. I want you to let him reach, I said. He's already decided he's won. Men who've decided they've won stop checking the floor for wires. We just have to not be the ones who stop him. And the counter-buy? Ready, funded, quiet. I didn't say with what. She didn't ask. Some things between us had become the kind you don't itemize. When he moves the money, you move yours. Not before. The order matters more than the amount. And if he doesn't take the bait? He took it weeks ago, I said. He just hasn't felt the hook yet. Greedy men swallow first and read the label in the ambulance. Yuna set a coffee down in front of each of us, including the lawyer, who looked startled to be included in anything warm. He'll do it tonight, she said. He's told 3 people it's already finished. He always announces the touchdown before he's crossed the line. Good, I said. Loud men keep schedules. And when it's done? Sarion asked. When it's done, we own it. He's in a room with the authorities, and you put your name back on the door, I said. After that, there's a launch. I'd like, just once, to attend an event of yours that isn't an ambush. My phone sat face up on the table, and it kept lighting. Jin. A message, then another, stacking unread like a column of small apologies addressed to a man who'd stopped living at this address. I turned it face down without reading them and went back to the folder. You're not even gonna look, Syrian said. I know what they say, I said. They say sorry. They say can we talk? They say you were right. There's no version of those words I need tonight. Maybe not any night. She let it go. Queens know when a door is shut, for keeps. There's a cruelty people expect at this point in the story, the gloating call, the speech, the wind rubbed in. I didn't have it in me, and I didn't want it. Indifference was the only thing she couldn't argue with, and the only thing I had left to hand her. So we waited, which is the part nobody films, not the cleverness, the stillness, the discipline of letting an enemy build his own gallows while your hands stay folded in your lap. Then the lawyer's screen pinged, and he read it, and he almost smiled, which for him was a standing ovation. It's done, he said. He completed the takeover, the funds cleared, then he just signed it, I said, and stood. Let's go take the company back. The boardroom was full of the same faces that had raised their hands against her a week before. Her father's table, again. Taehyun sat in the crown chair now, and he wore it like a man who'd been measuring it for years. He'd even had the nameplate changed already. A small thing, a petty thing. The kind of detail a man arranges when he's wanted a chair so long that sitting in it matters more to him than running the company underneath it. Serian, he said, almost gentle, when she walked in with me a step behind. I wish you hadn't come. This part is undignified. Then let's make it quick, she said, and sat down across from him without being offered a chair. The takeover closed an hour ago, Taehyun told the room, spreading his hands to the gallery and the press along the wall. Serian Group is under new stewardship. Stable hands. I know there's emotion here, but let's be adults about this. That was 3. I kept the tally where I kept everything. He smoothed his tie, enjoying the weather he thought he'd made. The company is mine, he said, by process, by vote, by right of who actually built it into something while she played with chemists. A few board members nodded, the same easy nod from a week ago. Pio, the old man, didn't. He was watching Sarayan's face, and Sarayan's face was perfectly calm, and calm on a deposed queen is the kind of thing that makes wise men check the exits. You should be proud, actually, Taehyun told her. I kept it in the family, your father's company, still run by a Kang, just the competent one. My father never raised a hand to the people who built beside him, she said. You raised yours to vote me out of his chair. Don't say his name in this room again. Sirayan didn't argue the point. She slid a single document across the long table instead. Counter offer, she said, filed 20 minutes ago, funded in full. It supersedes yours, because yours hasn't finished settling, and mine has. His smile held, because he hadn't read it yet. He read it. The smile came off in stages, like paint in cold weather. This isn't funded, he said. It's funded, the lawyer said. Settled, cleared. Unlike yours, which is still in the air, which is the only place yours will ever be now. You can't do this, he said, turning to the men who'd voted him in. We had an agreement. Nobody answered him. An agreement, it turns out, is only as solid as the moment it stops being profitable, and that moment had just walked in, wearing a regulator's badge. Cute, he said. With what money? You're a deposed founder's daughter, with a chemist for a boyfriend. With his, she said. Turns out the man you fired had royalties you never bothered to find. The ghost nose was never broke. He was just quiet about it. You'd have known if you'd ever looked past the coat. The screen at the end of the room woke up. One line of text. A transfer the takeover's funding traced from the rival conglomerate through a shell into the account that closed the deal, authorized by a single signature. His. That's the part that interests the regulators, I said. Not who owns the company, who wired the money, and from whom. The woman from the financial authority, who'd stood quietly at the back the whole time, took out a pen. That was the moment the room understood she wasn't press. The press understood it too, and swung their cameras around to film the back of the room instead of the front. The room went very quiet. Taehyun's eyes went to the screen, then to his own phone, where a notification sat glowing confirmation of the very transfer that now hung on the wall for everyone to read. He looked at it for one long second, then he turned the phone face down on the table, slowly, with great care, the way a woman had once done in an apartment across the city when the floor first dropped out. I'd watched my wife make that exact gesture on my birthday, the same small, hopeless dignity of turning a screen away from a truth the whole room has already read. It runs in this family of liars, apparently, the instinct to hide the evidence after everyone's memorized it. This is a misunderstanding, he said. Let's be adults. That's for, I said, out loud this time. He blinked. What? Nothing. Keep going. He'd said it like a spell every time the ground shifted, and the ground had stopped listening. You think a transaction proves anything? His voice climbed a register. Do you know who I am? This is my family's company. My blood built this, and you, a chemist, a nobody, and there it went. The fifth time, he didn't say, let's be adults. The fifth time, he screamed. A record, honestly. The Polish lasted right up until it didn't. He turned to the board, hunting for the hands that had saved him a week ago. They were busy now, studying the table, the windows, the careful middle-distance men find when a sinking man tries to catch their eye. The same hands, a different vote, written in advance, in silence. The doors opened. They always open at the worst possible moment for the man at the head of the table. That's almost the definition of the table. Two officers, a woman from the financial authority, and the lawyer who never wasted a clause, holding the folder we'd brought. He'd built his whole move on speed, closed the deal before anyone could read it. He'd forgotten that speed cuts both ways. A thing done fast in the dark can be undone just as fast in the light. And we had brought a great deal of light. Mr. Kang, the woman said, we'll need to discuss several wire transfers. Taehyun stood so fast the crown chair rolled back and hit the window. There's nowhere to run in a glass room. He learned that the way everyone learns it, by trying. The slide the lawyer put up had no theater in it, no reluctant grief, no tour of his own genius, just connections, drawn plainly. A wire from a competitor. A mole inside Syrian who fed that competitor the formula. The mole's handler, who signed the override that let her in. The lines all met at one chair. No accusation, no raised voice, just geometry. The lawyer never once said Taehyun did this. He let the lines say it, and lines don't shout, and lines don't exaggerate, and a room believes a diagram long after it has stopped believing a man. For the record, the lawyer said, the internal leak earlier this year was not a failure of Ms. Kang's security. It was an operation. The employee who carried it out has been identified. A name went up. Hyejin's. The room inhaled. My ex-wife, the mole, finally public, in a font large enough for the cameras. Somewhere across the city she would see her own name on a screen the way I'd once seen the suite booking on mine. The wheel turns. It just turns slowly enough that the people riding the top never believe they're on it until the day they're under it. I felt the room turn to see if I'd react. I didn't. I'd done my reacting months ago, in an apartment, over a cold cup of coffee. This was just the paperwork catching up to a thing I'd already survived. People expected grief from me, or triumph, something photogenic. I gave them a man checking his watch. The launch was tomorrow, and a cornered cousin was somewhere out there with nothing left to lose and one beautiful thing left to ruin. An officer fit cuffs onto Taehyun's accomplice, a mid-level man who'd signed where he shouldn't have, and who now discovered that loyalty to a sinking chairman buys you a seat in the same boat. He went quietly. The quiet ones always sign the most. He made me, the accomplice said, to no one, the way they all say it. It was Taehyun. He ordered every bit of it. Save it for the statement, the officer said. But the cameras had it, and a man selling out his chairman on the walk to the car is its own small genre. I'd seen Ju-won perform it better. Practice, I suppose. Yuna's phone lit, and she read the headlines aloud in her flat little voice, like a weather report for other people's disasters. The boutique chain filed for bankruptcy this morning. The Jew family, and the competitor's been charged industrial theft, the stolen formula. They're naming everyone. She set the phone down. It's a busy day for fonts. 3 empires, 3 different mornings. Ju-won's family learned that borrowed status is a loan the world calls in all at once. The competitor learned that stolen genius comes with the original author still attached. And Taehyun learned that a coup, like a wire transfer, always leaves a record. Ju-won's family, bankrupt. The competitor, caught with the stolen formula in their hands. Taehyun, in cuffs in his own coup. 3 enemies, 3 different kinds of ruin in one afternoon, and I hadn't raised my voice once. I just handed each of them enough rope and a good light to tie the knot by. My presentation had fewer slides than Taehyun's restructuring, I noticed. A good presentation never needs a brochure. The truth fits on one line, if you've done the work to earn the line. Across the city, my phone buzzed one more time against the table, face down where I'd left it. Hyejin again, the mole, now unemployed in every sense, calling the one number that used to always pick up. It rang out. For 3 years, she'd let mine go to silence. She was fluent in that language now, and I had nothing left to translate. That was the cost of all of it. The part the title fight never shows. I'd won everything and felt the temperature of none of it. The man who married her 3 years ago would have picked up on the first ring. That man had retired on a balcony with a cold dinner, and he wasn't coming back to answer her calls. See, Ryan stood at the head of her father's table, in the chair that was hers again, and for a moment she just rested her hand flat on the wood, the way you touch something you thought you'd buried. "It's ours again," she said quietly, to me, not to the room. The room didn't need to hear it. I did. Then Yuna's voice cut in, no longer flat. "Boss, the launch." We turned. Eternity goes live at the gala tomorrow night. 200 guests, full press. She held up her phone. Building security just flagged it. Someone's been in the venue after hours. Taehyun made one call from holding before they took his phone. One call, I repeated. To who? Unknown. A burner. Yuna's jaw tightened, but he was smiling when they cuffed him. Men don't smile in cuffs unless they've left a fuse burning somewhere you can't see it yet. A cornered man doesn't surrender. He breaks the thing he can't keep. Taehyun had lost the company, the chair, the money, his name, everything but one last act of spite. If he couldn't own eternity, he'd make sure no one could. The trap had closed. The clock had just started. A year ago, I sat 60 floors above this city and watched my marriage fail to show up for my birthday. Tonight, I stood under brighter lights, in front of 200 guests, launching the scent that started all of it. The expo center glowed. Eternity sat on a lit pedestal at center stage, a single flacon under glass, and the whole industry that had once looked past me now leaned forward to breathe what I'd made. Funny thing about being a ghost for 10 years, you forget what your own name sounds like in a room full of people saying it kindly. I'd hidden that long to keep a dead man's work safe. Tonight, in that light, I finally let the work carry my name. He'd have liked that, the old man. He always said the work deserved better than my fear. Try not to enjoy this too much, Saeryeon murmured beside me, her name back on the building, the crown back where it belonged. I'm a professional, I said. I enjoy precise work. You've used that line all year. It keeps being true. She looked good up there, restored and dangerous, the most powerful person in any room she chose to enter. A year ago, she was a phone voice that ended my marriage in 11 words. Now she was the woman I came home to. Life edits faster than people think. The press riser was a wall of lenses. Reporters who'd printed thief beside my face a few weeks ago now spelled creator under it. A reputation really is just a rumor with better lighting, and tonight the lighting was mine. My old factory director sat in the third row, the one who'd fired me with a cardboard box and an apology. He applauded with everyone else. I gave him a small nod. I'm not a cruel man. I just have an excellent memory and a long arm. I should have been happy. I was, in the cold professional way I'm allowed to be. But somewhere under the applause, a detail had its hand up at the back of the room, and I've never been able to ignore a detail asking to be called on. Everyone in that hall was watching the stage. I was watching the flacon, occupational deformation, back on the clock. The glass caught the light a half shade wrong, and the seal on the cap sat a millimeter off true, the way a thing sits when a careful hand has opened it and closed it again. Nobody else would have caught it. That's the whole point of a man like me, and the whole reason a man like Taehyun believed he could win. He kept mistaking quiet for blind. People do. It's the most expensive assumption in the world. Near the entrance, half in shadow, a man in a good suit stood where a man under investigation shouldn't be. Taehyun, out on bail, in from the cold, crumpling a gala program in his fist like he could wring the night out of it. He'd made his one phone call from holding and smiled. Now I understood the smile. If he couldn't own eternity, he'd make sure the world watched the great ghost nose unveil a ruined one. Humiliate the work, humiliate the man. It was almost elegant. He'd learned something after all. He's here, Saeryeon breathed, spotting him too. They let him out? Investigation, not conviction. Not yet, I said. He came to watch me fail in public. Considerate of him. He'll get a show, just not the one he printed tickets for. Saeryeon, I said quietly, not moving my stage smile. When we go to the reveal, follow my lead and don't react. What's wrong? Someone edited my launch, I said. Smell you later, possibly literally. The ceremony built itself up, all anticipation and chrome. Saeryeon spoke. The room loved her. The lights narrowed to the pedestal, and the host turned to me to invite the creator to present, in person, the scent of a generation. The trap was simple and cruel. Lift the flacon, present it to the master noses in the front row, let them recoil at a spoiled, switched fake, and let 200 cameras record the legend failing at the one thing he was famous for. A sabotage that needed me to perform it for them. It was, I'll admit, well made. He'd finally outsourced his cruelty to a chemist instead of a bragging boyfriend. If he'd been this careful 3 years ago, he might have been genuinely dangerous. Talent shows up late for some men, usually around the time of their own arrest. So I lifted the flacon under the glass, and I brought it to my face the way I've brought 10,000 cents to my face, and I knew in one breath that it was wrong. Not eternity. A cheap soured copy, the same counterfeit Taehyun's people had been pushing, poured into my bottle to rot my name on live television. A year ago, this would have ended me. Tonight it just told me which pocket to reach into. Forgive me, I said to the room. Easy, unhurried. A good nose never trusts the bottle on the table. He brings his own. And I drew the real eternity from my coat, the one I'd carried in, because I don't trust rooms, and I never have. The front row leaned in the master noses, the jury of the whole trade, the ones no label or flash can fool. If the fake had reached their hands, the story would have written itself. It never reached their hands. I'd carried the truth in my coat the way I carry everything that matters. I passed the true sample to the old master in the front row, the one who'd known my teacher's hand. He breathed it in, and his face did the thing faces do in the presence of the real thing. That, he said into the live mic, loud enough for the world, is the most beautiful work I have smelled in 30 years. The applause hit like weather. And at the back of the room, a man watched his last beautiful idea curdle, and decided, the way cornered men always decide, that if he was going down, he'd take the microphone with him. You want to talk about frauds? Taehyun's voice cracked across the hall as he shoved past a guard and seized a floor mic. Let me tell you what this man and that woman really are. Let me tell you who really. He had the whole room. He always wanted the whole room. He never once asked what it cost to hold it. Sirayan moved to stop him. I caught her wrist gently. Let him, I said. This is the part where he saves us the trouble. She understood and went still. And together, we watched a man climb onto the one platform tall enough for the whole world to see him fall off it. He walked up to that microphone entirely on his own, exactly as written, in a script he'd never bothered to read. I didn't push him. I'd simply made sure the right people were in the audience when he finally couldn't stop himself. Because the thing about grabbing a microphone to expose everyone is that it points the room's attention at you. And standing along that same back wall, badges quiet under their coats, were the people from the financial authority who'd been waiting to ask Mr. Kang about several wire transfers. I moved that money to protect this company from her, he was shouting, naming the wire, naming the dates, narrating his own case file into a live microphone. I did what had to be done. Every sentence he screamed to prove his innocence was a sentence the regulators had been missing for their file. He wasn't defending himself. He was dictating his confession to a stenographer he hadn't noticed. The beauty of it was that I didn't have to say a single word. For years, I'd been the one accused of stealing, of hiding, of scheming in the dark. And here was the real architect, under the brightest lights in the building, doing the prosecution's work louder and better than any lawyer ever could. They reached him under the brightest lights of his life. The microphone shrieked feedback as it fell from his hand and rolled across the stage. The cuffs caught every flash in the room. The polished face of stability, arrested at his own rival's launch, on his own words, in front of everyone he'd ever wanted to impress. Let's be adults about this, he said to the officer, reflexively, the spell to the very end. That was the 5th time, I think, or the 6th. I'd lost count, and for once I didn't mind. Some tallies finished themselves. I'd kept that count since a boardroom where he stole a chair and a phrase in the same afternoon. It felt petty at the time, counting a man's ticks. But pettiness, applied with enough patience, is just attention to detail, and attention to detail, in the end, was the only superpower I ever had. They walked him out through the lenses. He didn't fight, he just kept turning back toward the room, looking for one face that would defend him, and finding 200 people filming. He'd spent his whole life at this table. He left it the way her father's daughter never did, small, and alone, and loud. I thought that was the end of it. Then the doors at the side banged open, and a woman in a crumpled dress pushed through the crowd toward the stage. And the night had one more thing it wanted to show me. Hyejin came up the aisle like the last year had been chasing her on foot. The dress was cheap and wrinkled, and when she got close, I could see the price tag still tucked under the arm, never removed. She'd bought it for this, and she hadn't even had the money to keep it. There was a version of this I'd imagined in the worst week, back when I still heard enough to want it. In that version, I gloated. The real version was quieter and sadder and better. She'd become small entirely on her own. I hadn't had to shrink her. She'd done it by herself, one choice at a time. She got to the foot of the stage and she went down onto her knees, in front of the press, in front of Sirian, in front of the industry, and she reached out and held onto my shoes. Actually held them, like they might leave without her. "I'm sorry," she said, and the cameras drank it. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please. I'll do anything. We had 3 years. That has to mean something. Please. Just look at me." She looked up at me with a face I'd once have crossed a city for. "You don't understand," she said. "Juwan left. The job's gone. My family won't take my calls. You're all I have left. I was all you had the whole time," I said. "You just kept me in the drawer with the other things you assumed you could always come back to." She came for forgiveness in a dress with the tag still on it. Even her apology was a rental. I felt, distantly, that I should feel something, and I checked, the way you check a pocket you know is empty. "Get up," I said, not unkind. "You're on camera." "I don't care anymore," she said. "I gave everything up. I lost everything." "You didn't lose it," I said. "You spent it. There's a difference." "I kept the receipts. You'll remember that about me." 3 years, she tried again. 3 years has to count for something. "It counted," I said. "It's just that I finished paying, and you never started. There's no balance left between us, Hyejin. That isn't revenge. That's only the books. Closed. Please," she whispered. "Be fair. After everything, just be fair to me." And there it was. The same words she'd thrown at me across a kitchen table the day she threatened me with her parents' apartment. She'd asked for fairness then, when she thought fairness favored her. I crouched down so she could hear it without the microphones. "You asked for fairness," I said. "Now it's fair." Then I stood and I let go of nothing, because I was holding nothing, and I stepped back from her hands. That was the whole revenge in the end. Not a speech, not a slap. Just a man who used to come running, declining to run, while she knelt on a floor she'd chosen by every small choice that led here. I didn't hate her. Hate would have been something. I just had a launch to finish. Sirian crossed the stage then, unhurried, and the room held its breath. She stopped in front of me, took my face in both hands, and kissed me in front of every lens, every reporter, every person who'd ever called me gray. It was not a private kiss. She made sure of that. Then she looked down at the woman on her knees, and she said it loud enough for the cameras she usually despised. "Thank you," Sirian told her, "for throwing this diamond away." She didn't say it cruelly. She said it like a fact, which is worse and far more permanent. The press loved it naturally. The CEO and her creator, the fairy tale reversal, the kneeling X. By morning, it would be everywhere. Sirian, who'd spent a lifetime being used by people who never once chose her out loud, had just chosen me in front of the entire world. She knew exactly what that was worth. So did I. Hyejin's hands closed on empty air where my shoes had been. Somewhere in the crowd, a phone was already turning her into a clip that would outlive her name. She'd wanted status more than she'd wanted me. She'd ended with neither, on a borrowed floor, in a borrowed dress. We left her there because there was nothing to take and nothing to give, and the kindest thing left was the exit. The press parted. The flashes followed us out the way they'd once followed her in. The wheel had finished its slow, complete turn. The penthouse was quiet after all that noise. The city spread out below the glass the way it had been on my birthday, except this time the second chair wasn't empty. Sirian stood at the window with her shoes off and her armor finally on the floor where it belonged. On the table between us sat the flacon, the original, the handmade one. The birthday gift my wife had left unopened on a shelf for a year. I'd carried it out of that apartment and never thrown it away. Some things you keep until they find the right hands. I'd carried that bottle out of a dead marriage and through a year of war, never quite able to throw it out, never quite knowing why. Now I knew. It had never been a gift for the woman who left it on a shelf. It had always been waiting for the one who would understand what it was. "You never told me what's in it," Sirian said. "It's the same scent," I said. "Eternity. The first one I ever made of it." She went still. She understood before I finished, the way she understood everything. "You made it before you met me." "I made it years ago," I said. "I didn't know whose summer I was rebuilding. I just knew it was someone's, and that someone had been loved, and I wanted to know what that smelled like." She picked up the flacon and finally, after a year and a lifetime, opened it. The scent of her one good summer filled a room 60 floors above a city that had used her and never chosen her. Her eyes did a thing I'll keep for myself. Some reveals you don't give to a camera. It's an investment, she said very quietly, reaching for the old armor one last time, by reflex. No, I said, it isn't. Not anymore. Say the real thing. She was silent a moment, the flacon open in her hand, the city burning gold beneath us. Stay, she said. Just stay. A year ago, a woman called me on time, once, to tell me she wasn't coming. Tonight, a different woman asked me, in the plainest words she owned, to stay. I'd spent a decade as a ghost and 3 years as a convenience. I was done being either. I'm not going anywhere, I said. I retired from leaving people. The hours were terrible. She laughed a real one this time, weather and all, and I closed the distance, and the scent of an eternity neither of us had believed in settled over the only two people in the world who knew what it was. The flacon was finally in the right hands, so, at last was I.
Before we finish, notice the psychological game behind this story. The hero does not win by shouting, chasing, or begging to be understood. He wins by controlling timing. He lets Hae-jin expose her own lies. Lets Ju-won talk until his mask falls. Lets Maurice explain the stolen formula in public. And lets Tae-hyun grab the microphone before the authorities step in. That is a powerful lesson. Sometimes the smartest move is silence. Not weakness, but pressure. He saves evidence, waits for the right room, chooses witnesses carefully, and makes every enemy finish the trap with their own hands. This video has value because it shows that self-respect is not always loud. Real power can look calm, patient, and almost invisible until the truth finally has the perfect stage. The lesson is simple. Do not waste your energy proving your worth to people who already decided to ignore it. Build your proof. Choose your timing. Protect the people who actually stand with you. And let results speak where anger would only make noise. Subscribe and leave a like if you want more stories where revenge is not just emotion, but strategy.